Greetings, programs, and welcome to a very special Awesome Friday on a Tuesday. Tomorrow, April 20th, 2022, is National Canadian Film Day, an annual event organized by Real Canada in which we celebrate Canadian film both across our fair country and around the world. Here is a quick trailer for the day.
There are so many things Canadians disagree about. Like which Canadian Ryan is sexier. Like whether we need to wear hard pants ever again. Like whether pineapple on pizza should just not be allowed at all, ever. There is one thing we can agree on. On National Canadian Film Day, we can watch a great Canadian film. Join us.
This morning I sat down on Zoom with Jack Blum, Executive Director of Real Canada, to speak about this year's event, including the tribute to the late Jean-Mac Vallée and for this year's focus on Indigenous storytelling. Here now is that interview, and I hope you enjoy it. So good morning. Thank you for joining.
Good morning. My pleasure.
Why don't we just start? Why don't you actually just introduce yourself a little bit?
My name is Jack Blum. I am the Executive Director and co-founder of Real Canada, which does many things, among which is the presentation of National Canadian Film Day every year on the third Wednesday in April, which is where we are now.
And what year is this for Canadian National Film Day?
Number 9, believe it or not. We started in 2014, and we were just very, very proud that we had 70 screenings across the country. And now in 2022, as we edge hopefully of this pandemic, we're more than 1,100 screenings across the country and around the world in 50 countries.
That is impressive, actually. From 70 to 1,100.
1,100, yeah, it's almost hard to grasp for me.
Yeah, that's actually kind of hard for me to grasp, to be totally honest.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. People have embraced it. Now, there's several hundred schools, there's several hundred libraries. We also reach retirement homes, Legion halls, community centers, certainly cinemas and film festivals. Kind of wherever you can show a movie, people jump in and get engaged. And then in addition to that, all of the major broadcasters and streaming services, and I mean all of them, you can see it on our website, canfilmday.ca, they all put on Canadian movies that day. It's, I think, the only day of the year when they work cooperatively with one another. They all show Canadian movies. Last April, when we didn't have the live screenings, more than 2.5 million Canadians watched a Canadian movie. That's something that's been embraced, and we're incredibly humbled by that.
Is there a province or territory that is untouched by it? Like, is there screenings?
No.
There's screenings everywhere.
Everywhere, and you can see it on the map on the website. Every province, every territory, and we have wonderful little quirky things. There's a little town called Hay River. I believe it's the Northwest Territories. They have it's a tiny little town in the Northwest Territories. They have 2 screenings, but from 2 different organizations, and they have to fight over the local, cinema about who gets the later slot. It's hysterical, but they do.
And as I understand, there's a setup on the website where you can host like a private screening as well. Like anyone can sort of jump in on this. Is that right?
Anyone can jump in. We have a few films that are being offered on our platform if you want to see, for example, this year we are offering a tribute to Jean-Mac Vallée because his passing was so sudden and so shocking. So we have his masterpiece, Crazy. That is available for free for anyone all day. You go to our website, click on, and you'll get to it and you can watch it. And similarly, because we were also saddened by the sudden passing of Ivan Reitman, you can find Meatballs. You can find the interview last NCFD. Ivan participated in a little reunion panel, and that piece of sort of reminisce and discussion of the movie is on our platform as well. So there are a few things that people can access that are direct for anyone from our platform. And then there are all the different streaming platforms, all of the different broadcasters, etc.
It's honestly, what I find really interesting about this is that as a guy who's relatively plugged into film, I think I only heard about this for the first time like 3 years ago, but it feels like it's kind of ballooning, but in the best way possible.
Indeed. Yeah. The turning point was the sesquicentennial, which I guess had a lot of people stirred up, and rightly so. We were able to kind of get funding for a sesquicentennial project, and not to make you dizzy, but that year the number of screenings hit 1,800. So what we didn't know was after that whether they would come back, and that's why we're so pleased that following that, more than half of them come back annually to celebrate.
Well, so could you take me through, just for everyone who's listening, there's a number of sort of like marquee events across the country.
Yes.
I mean, obviously we're here in Vancouver, so what's happening in Vancouver on the day?
Goodness me. If I take a pause and pull up some information, you'll
Sure.
be sympathetic. With that many screenings, I don't actually have them all in my head.
That's fair enough.
But as I say, the best way to do it is to go to canfilmday.ca, and you can just click, for example, on British Columbia, and you will see that there are 55 screenings in BC. And you can then search in any particular city. You can look in Vancouver. I know that Vancouver Film Festival is doing a day's offering. They're showing Scarborough. They're showing a film that Jean-Mac Vallée executive produced called The Big Wave, which is all about music, really interesting film. And in the evening, it's the theatrical premiere of a new Indigenous French language thriller called L'Inhumain, which is in English, The Inhuman. So we love it too that in the recent years, certain films have decided to use National Canadian Film Day to launch, and that's what L'Inhuman is doing. It's had a couple of small festival screenings, but this is the beginning of its theatrical life. So Vancouver Festival is doing that, and there are various guests. They're also screening Forgotten Warrior by Loretta Todd, who's a well-established Indigenous filmmaker in Vancouver. Our spotlight this year is Indigenous films, and we went that way because it just seemed so obvious to us that the explosion in recent years of amazing Indigenous work had to be recognized and looked at. When last year, Beans, an Indigenous film by Tracy Deer, won Best Picture at the CSAs. This year, Night Raiders was nominated, I think it was 11 times, and won several CSAs. That work is starting to dominate where we're recognizing Canadian films, so it just seemed important to highlight that. So we've selected, I think, 34 really notable and interesting Indigenous films of all kinds, and there are lots more than that as well, but that's where we started. So in every place where people are showing films, often they're showing something from the spotlight, something that's Indigenous. So for example, if there's an independent cinema in your town, and there I know are at least half a dozen, probably more than that in BC, small towns that have really great little independent cinemas, they are screening a combination of one or more of Beans or Night Raiders by Dennis Goulet, or Crazy, the Jean-Mac Vallée tribute. So some are screening more than one of those films, and wherever you are, if you're in a place that has one of those cinemas, I know Nelson, Golden, BC, Kamloops, they are participating in that program and screening those films.
It's so cool to see Canadian film highlighted in such an interesting and diverse way. And I also think that, Indigenous stories in Canadian cinema, I mean, they're dominating right now, but that's where some of our most interesting work is coming from. So that's, I think,
totally
an excellent way to go. Like Beans last year, great. Night Raiders last year, great. I've actually seen, I didn't review it on the site, but L'Inhumain is also great.
Oh, you've seen it? Good for you.
I think it was at Whistler Film Festival.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, there's so many interesting stories coming out of there.
Well, what's fascinating there, it's thrilling to me, is the way in which these filmmakers are grabbing genre and infusing it with incredible resonance from their point of view. Like when you look at something like Night Raiders, this futuristic dystopian thriller, but it's about residential schools. And so it's a genre that I would normally not particularly pay attention to, but I was incredibly moved when I saw that film, for both for what it was saying and for the way it was, I'll use a phrase, recolonizing the screen, like sort of taking it back and saying, here, we're grabbing this and using it to talk about what we need to talk about. And I just think it's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, there was another one last year called Don't Say Its Name, which is where they repurposed a native myth into a horror story, which
Uh,
I just think there's so many interesting stories that are centered on people we haven't historically centered, and it's
yes.
I'm very glad that it's sort of coming out in our culture and storytelling now.
It's part of the raison d'etre for National Canadian Film Day and for Real Canada as a whole, which promotes Canadian film in different ways across the country all year, is to celebrate that diversity.
Yeah.
The question of, oh, what is a Canadian film and what does it mean to be Canadian and all of that. What's been interesting this past couple of decades, I would say, is the way in which our own understanding of our diversity and our celebration of our diversity as the thing that really defines us. And in a time in the world when I think that's an extremely valuable virtue to be championing, is so reflected in our cinema, so naturally reflected in our cinema. So one of the things we've always tried to do is just simply spread the buffet table wide and say, just pick something, just they come from every culture, every background, every kind of story, every genre. That's what Canadian film is, and we're celebrating it.
That's excellent. Well, obviously the big event this year is this tribute to Jean-Mac Vallée, which seems like an easy choice given his untimely passing. What drew you to Crazy as the choice?
Good question. I think that we won't know this right away, but I think that will be his legacy. He did some great American work for sure. There's Blacklist and Café de Flore and other things, but Crazy is, first of all, it was his breakout film. Like it took everyone by surprise when it came out. No one expected, that had some familiarity with him as a filmmaker, expected him to produce something that was so original in voice. Mm-hmm. The way in which in it he uses music, the way in which he plays with realism and surrealism and fantasy, the way in which he brings together the church and the family and the culture of the day and the period. And it's all anchored and grounded in this incredible challenge and reward of familial love. It's really moving. It's a really moving film. And I think it's a masterpiece. And I think it will be recognized as that. I think that film will become synonymous with his name as time goes on. I mean, if you haven't seen that film, see that film. It is really rewarding.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen it recently. I saw it when it was new, but
yeah, there's a 4K restoration. That's what we're offering. There's a beautiful new version. It was tied up for a little while because he has the term is needle drop when you're working in movies, which is songs that you buy, and he bought some very expensive songs and the rights ran out, and there was a big wrangle about how to get it so that it could be released again. The irony being it was not released originally in the States precisely because they couldn't afford to buy the music for the American market, so they bought it for everywhere else. So it's our treasure in a way, but it is back, and by all means see it again. We watched it right after the news of his death reached us around Christmas time, and it was every bit as moving and as vivid as it was the first time.
And it's streaming on the website, and it's showing in every market.
It is showing in wherever, a lot of different independent cinemas, 20 of them across the country, I would think, including 10 in Quebec, interestingly. So they're showing it. I think there's probably about 30 or 40 screenings of it all told across the country live. And then, as I say, if you go to our website, you can log in and get yourself a ticket.
That's great. And is that anyone can stream anywhere, like worldwide, or just in Canada?
No, just in Canada. It is screening internationally, but in territories that are geo-blocked for wherever they are.
Right. And you mentioned, so the Canadian National Film Day is happening outside of Canada. What are some notable things that are happening outside of Canada?
Okay, now you're really testing me. So just give me a second. Give me a second, because as I say, it's too much to keep in one tiny brain. So, but again, it's fun if you go to the map. Like I'm looking at the map right now, and I can see that in Iceland, they're screening Bootlegger, which is a new
Well,
indigenous film,
that's a great movie.
which I haven't seen yet. So you're ahead of me. In Lithuania, they are going to be screening Run Woman Run, a new film by Zoe Hopkins.
That's also a fun movie.
Really great. You're really well. You're doing. You've really covered the territory. I'm impressed.
I tried to focus a lot on Canadian film in the last year, especially.
Well, you've done well.
And yeah, it's been very rewarding.
In Poland, they're going to be screening Drunken Birds. I'll just give you one more European country. Belgium is going to be screening Night Raiders. And then if we flip over to South Asia, we've got Laos, they're screening Beans. I mean, this is crazy stuff. In Taipei, they're screening Run Woman Run. We go over to Africa. In Cameroon, they're screening Crazy. It's quite fun to look at the map. It's every continent too. In Colombia, they're screening Night Raiders. So, you can find it for yourself.
It is really cool that Canadian National Film Day is such an international event.
Yes, indeed. And it's also fun that it's challenging to say because it's called National Canadian Film Day, but even we find that a mouthful and get it confused from time to time. So just to say.
Obviously, the event is growing and spreading worldwide. Have you started putting an eye towards next year yet, or are you still focused on this year?
Shoot me right now, Matthew. It's hard to describe what it's like trying to marshal, like when the responses start to come in, and like all of these screenings. One of the reasons that I think it works is because we deal with all of these partners quite specifically. Like we help them find films for their audience and their community, because we're not just saying, oh, watch a Canadian film or watch this particular one. We're saying, find a Canadian film that's going to work for you, because not everybody likes every movie. And so it's a lot of hand holding. And so by the time, and we didn't know what was going to happen this year with COVID. Frankly, I thought after 2 years away from our partners, if we got to 500 screenings, I was going to be totally thrilled. So when it starts to come in this volume, it's a lot to juggle. So my goal right now is to survive. If we can survive past tomorrow, then we'll be encouraged and we'll figure out what we can do next year. But also it's important to see how this works, how people find the screenings. We get tons of response, right? The partners all write to us, and how did it all go? So we have to incorporate all of that, find out how the international screenings went, and that will be used to inform what happens next year.
Well, great. I don't actually have any more questions for everybody. I want to say thank you for your time, and thank you for organizing this whole event. I think it's a really cool event, and I can't wait to see how it goes.
Well, thank you so much for being such a diligent consumer yourself of Canadian film, and happy National Canadian Film Day.
Once again, that was Jack Blum, Executive Director of Reel Canada, the organization that organizes National Canadian Film Day, which I managed to say wrong several times in this interview. For more information on National Canadian Film Day, you can check out their website at canfilmday.ca or their Twitter handle at canfilmday, and you can find those links in the show notes below. This episode of the Awesome Friday podcast was produced and recorded by me, Matthew Simpson, on the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving us a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. Or for more direct support, we do have a Patreon, which will also be linked in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and whatever day it is, I hope you're having an awesome Friday.